Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to do the unpopular opinions book tag. There is the original tag, which is this one, as well as the unpopular opinions 2.0 tag, which is the tag that I created. I'll have the questions for this in the description bar in case you yourself would like to answer any of these or if you want to answer along as you watch this. And then for the 2.0 tag, I'll have my most recent one of that I've done linked in the description bar in case it's not enough unpopular opinions today and you're looking for more. But I like doing both of these tags periodically, mainly because when I pick up books and even when I discuss them, I haven't looked at anybody else's thoughts. I try to avoid seeing what the general opinion is about works of fiction. I also don't look at reviews or even average ratings ahead of time. There are, of course, instances where it's unavoidable because something blows up, it gets really big, or maybe in trying to look up a release date, there's a lot of early reviews and you start to see early buzz for something. So of course there are instances where this is not quite possible, but as much as I can, I try to eliminate any other thoughts or feelings before I've had a chance to discuss them, which means that the unpopular opinions tag is a great one to facilitate me actually finally being exposed to what other people think and feel. And sometimes I'm semi-validated, but sometimes I'm greatly surprised, which is I feel like what this tag showcases really well. So I'll go ahead and jump straight into it. The first question, very straightforward, a popular book or series that you didn't care for. And of course, there are a number of books that I could mention for this, but I try to keep it to the last amount of books that I have picked up since the previous time that I answered these so that it's a little bit more up to date. And I think for this one, I have to go with A Discovery of Witches. I knew that this was a slightly older fantasy work. I also knew there was an adaptation. I don't think I knew just how popular it was. Anytime there's a new release for the series, I don't even realize it's a part of the series because it's been going for so long that it just doesn't even register. But I finally picked it up last year and I actually quite enjoyed the first part of it. It felt like dark academia, or at the very least an academic setting. I know that there are people who have gone in depth about the differences between an academic setting versus actual dark academia because they do explore different things. Regardless though, jumped into this one. I liked the setting. I actually really enjoyed kind of the day-to-day feeling of how the pacing was done, because something that I think a lot of us who are especially big fans of epic fantasy, not that this is epic fantasy, but a lot of fans of epic fantasy kind of like sitting with the characters and feeling like they get lost in these worlds. We don't necessarily always want to gloss over some of these things. We feel like this is what grounds us in what is otherwise something so vast and grand. So I actually liked the day-to-day feelings of this book. We follow this woman who is involved with academia, and she also knows that she is a witch, but she doesn't want to rely on her witch abilities to help her progress in life. She, as much as possible, rejects that. She wants to feel like she's earned it. And some of this is rooted in things that happened to her family. So you also are getting bits and pieces of some of the trauma that has really lasted into adulthood and impacted her entire life. But I started to not love it once the love interest became more prominent. Initially, it was really interesting because they were kind of taking things slow and sort of just dating in a very normal way. And then it got to a point where it just feels like a light switch went off and suddenly the characters are the most in love any couple has ever been and they'll do anything for each other and they're really possessive of each other. One of them is a little bit more possessive than the other, and guess who that particular person is? You can guess based off of all trends pretty much. But it was like the formula that I think a lot of modern romantasy trends are rooted in. It was like it was right there just before romantasy really took off. So I can see this one really working for a lot of people, but maybe it would have felt more original at the time. But especially going back and reading it, I was like, I've seen this so many times. And also I really didn't like the way that the love interest interacted with the character. I'm not always actually opposed to slightly more insta-love feelings within stories, as sometimes it's semi-realistic, or maybe the time period that a story is focusing on, you don't really have an actual formal courting or dating. It's sort of like two characters are together and then now they have to figure out life with one another, and maybe they develop feelings quickly or whatever. It can it can work in fiction, but in this instance, it didn't for me. I just found him so obnoxious. He also kind of leaned into liking the main character because she wasn't like other girls, which semi-prompted a whole deep dive video I did about the not like other girls trope. And when I went to actually, after I read it and I talked about it, when I finally looked at the average rating, it's quite high. And there are a lot of individuals who have read this book. So it pretty well fits, I think, this first question of a popular book you didn't like. Switching now to question 2, this is a reverse of the first one. So rather than a popular book that everyone seems to love that you didn't, it's a popular book it seems like people don't really love but that you did. I am definitely taking some liberties because this author is very well liked. They have a wildly successful career. But I'm zeroing in specifically on what has come across to me like a shift in sentiment, I guess, with how people talk about this author's works and the level of hype and even the level of fandom. I don't feel like it's quite the same for this author as I see from other fantasy authors. So the author that I'm referring to would be V.E. Schwab, and I'll specifically say Shades of Magic and maybe even the Villains series. So I know for people that maybe only recently in the last few years have gotten into reading fantasy, maybe this seems very different from what you've experienced. But I remember when V.E. Schwab was first blowing up, because actually she had a really difficult publishing journey where publishing did not treat her particularly well. And if you're curious about this, it's more so for the archive series. She had to really, really push through, which just shows the passion that she has for writing and the fact that she was able to persevere through all of that and then continue and then have success, which is great. However, not talking about that, talking about when she was first becoming popular, when the Shades of Magic series was first finishing, and then when the Villains series was first coming onto the scene. At the time, the first book, Vicious, was only known to be a standalone. Based off of some things that happened with the archive series, I would have to imagine she structured it that way just in case something happened again. But regardless, we won't be going into V. Schwab's entire publishing journey and hiccups along her career. But the point is, when it was really taking off, when Shades of Magic was really becoming popular, I remember at that time, V. Schwab was like the it author in fantasy circles. Everybody was loving her works. Everybody was talking about her works. Everybody was talking about the cover design for her works. Everybody was talking about the creativity of her works. People were just loving V.E. Schwab. That settled a little bit, and then the pendulum swung a little bit the other direction, where it started to turn into conversations about, oh, I think V.E. Schwab's overrated, or because she does write a variety of different types of stories, sometimes people would pick up one and be like, I don't really like this, I don't get the hype. Or they'd pick up one and they'd like it and they'd read something else and be like, I liked this, but I couldn't stand this. And I do think that the pendulum is swinging back. I am very aware that Addie LaRue is very well loved. Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil isn't just well loved, it won the Goodreads Choice Award last year. I'm not saying that everybody hates V.E. Schwab. As noted, I'm taking some liberties with how I'm answering this question, but I feel like my feelings for V.E. Schwab's works have kind of always remained the same. Actually, when I reread Shades of Magic, I think I liked it more upon reread, because I read it again in preparation for the new one, Fragile Threads of Power, which is a continuation series. And I would advise reading the first series, because even though marketing has said you can just jump into it from there, I think there's a lot of additional context that you lose out on. Getting back to the question though, I really just have found that it seems like people who maybe initially were really excited about V.E. Schwab, or maybe people who they even liked her works before, they sort of retroactively go, never mind. And I've just never felt that. I have always liked V.E. Schwab's books, and there have been some I've liked more than others, some that didn't quite work for me quite on the same level, and then others that I thought were fantastic. But it just has seemed like Shades of Magic specifically hasn't been as well loved. And then with the Villain series, Vicious was adored, it felt like, anyway, from everything I saw. People loved Vicious, and then people didn't really seem to care for the second one as much. But now the third one's been announced, I'm now starting to see a lot more people excited about this series again. It's just interesting. And I mean, a part of me is curious if this is just a more genuine reaction to an author's works, because maybe if we were to really zero in and study, because it doesn't feel like there's a fandom on the same level as something like Brandon Sanderson or Sarah J. Maas, maybe actually people can look at V.E. Schwab's works for what they are, because there's not like this collective, this is how we're supposed to feel sort of thing that occurs. And of course, people are capable of thinking for themselves, even if there are fandoms out there. But then sometimes people, if they speak and it goes against what is known to be the quote unquote correct opinion within the fandom, sometimes those people will get a lot of hate. So then sometimes people just don't really want to say how they actually feel. And there's a part of me that just wonders, maybe this is just a healthier group of fans because that doesn't occur as much. This is getting a little off topic. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about this, but switching now to the third question. The third question is either a love triangle where the character ended up with a person that you didn't really like, or a one true pairing that you didn't care for. Most of the books I have picked up in the last year or so haven't really had a love triangle. I don't think love triangles are quite as common these days. And a lot of authors love to tease a love triangle, but then be like, but actually, what if they could have both? And that's kind of a new thing now. So love triangles have evolved into something different. So I'll go with the one true pairing part of this. The Everlasting, I loved the writing in that book. I thought that it was exquisite. And there is a love story in the book. And I didn't care about the love interests the same way I do with other love stories. There are some love stories where you're like, these characters better be together or I'm going to wreak havoc. And I didn't necessarily feel that way about these characters. And I also didn't necessarily love the individual characters themselves either. But yet I loved the book. I've said before that my feelings for this book are so different from what I've typically experienced with stories because I'm such a character-driven reader. Doesn't mean I have to love the characters in order to love the book, but typically there is this attachment, at least, to them in some fashion. And this one, it was almost like the characters, they felt very real, but they also felt like they were, without becoming shallow and empty vessels, it felt like they were actually vehicles for representing the themes. But I maybe thought that's what pulled me in a lot, and they were well written. And the writing itself on a sentence by sentence level or just the prose, I thought that was fantastic. But it's very abnormal for me to love something to the extent that I liked this book without loving the characters. And if there's going to be a love story, without really loving the love story either. So it's not that I hated this. It's not like I was like, I hate this couple. I could have said A Discovery of Witches because the couple in that I didn't like. So maybe that would be a truer way to answer this question. But I thought, I don't know, this was a more interesting way to answer this question. Question 4, what is a popular genre that you just don't really reach for? And I have been trying to read more broadly, but at the end of the day, I still primarily read fantasy. So there's a part of me that's tempted to just say any other genre. But realistically, I was thinking about it, and thrillers and mysteries are exceptionally popular, and I hardly ever read them. So if you have your own recommendations for mysteries and thrillers, they don't have to be if you like fantasy books, these are good ones to get into because this one's kind of like this book, but without the magic. It doesn't even have to be that kind of recommendation. Just mysteries and thrillers that you think are fantastic. I have read a couple here and there, and I think it would be a really fun genre to get into because every now and then it is great to just jump into something and feel immediately on edge and also want to know what's going to happen or what is going on. I like that idea, but I just don't know if I know where to start as well. So if you have recommendations, please feel free to leave them. Question 5, a popular or beloved character that you don't like. Similar to The Everlasting, it is surprising to me that I ended up enjoying this book as much as I did when I didn't really like anyone in the book. And that would be Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I was entertained by them. At times they had very human moments where I'd go, aw. For example, Mr. Norrell has a part in the story where he is feeling overwhelmed, and he just wishes that he had never bothered trying to bring magic to England and that he had just stayed in his home with all of his books. And I really felt for him that moment, but at the same time, he's also a complete snob. He's sexist, he's elitist, and he also hoards knowledge in a way that is not good for society at times. He wants to be the only person really to bring knowledge to everyone else. He has jealousy issues in that area. So there are a lot of faults of this character, and I didn't necessarily like him, but I thought this speaks to just how well Clark wrote this story, because I don't think anybody was meant to be exceptionally likable. I mean, I think on surface level, Jonathan Strange is more likable, but he also gets sucked into certain things that you can see are unhealthy, or he's maybe too invested in his role in certain things without thinking about the broad consequences of his actions. And that's frustrating for me too. I really get irritated with characters that fail to see the impacts that they have on other people, and he has tremendous impacts on other people. They both do. So they both irritated me, but in a way that was endearing also, but I didn't like them. I didn't like anybody. So it's a popular book, and I would say some of these characters maybe are beloved, but I didn't care for either of them. But almost it feels like I wasn't supposed to. Anyway, the next question is a popular author that you can't seem to get into. Interestingly enough, I haven't actually read that much Alex E. Harrow, the author of The Everlasting, but with The Everlasting, I'm like, okay, I feel like I have found the book by this author that works for me. I am now very much looking forward to some of the other books I haven't checked out yet. In the past, I have said Adrienne Young because I have yet to find something by Adrienne Young that really clicks with me. A lot of things come really close, just haven't quite clicked. So Adrienne Young, that's still true for. The thing is, I haven't read any more Adrienne Young books in the last year or so. The author I'm going to say for this is an author whose books I like, but I feel like I should love his books. So I'm going to say Robert Jackson Bennett. I really like the new series, The Shadow of the Leviathan. I'm very excited for the third book. When I came back to this series, the second installment, it felt like coming home, a breath of fresh air. It's unique. The writing is really well done. I wouldn't mind a little bit more emphasis on the characters as far as getting to know them, spend time with them. But I think that the way it's written is great. It's a personal thing, not an objective, this should be this way. I think that he does balance plot with characters really well. And actually, I really like when you're getting to know the characters here and there as the plot progresses. I like that way of telling the story. I just want even more of them. But that, again, that's not a thing about a criticism of the book or the series. I like the series a lot. I think I've made that known in talking about it before. I hopefully am making it known now. But as stated, I feel like I should love everything by this author because I like how he balances the plot and the characters, and because of the insane levels of creativity that he has. I just haven't yet found the one that I am head over heels for, and I think I should. I am planning to read an older work of his, City of Stairs. I am curious to see, of course, how his career progresses and what else he writes after he's done with this series, Shadow of the Leviathan, but I still haven't found that one just yet. And I'm curious, for those of you who are fans of this author's works, if you've read all of them, Foundry Side, if you've read that series, if you've read this series and City of Stairs, which one has worked the most for you? Do you feel like they're pretty consistent with how you feel, or is there one that really stands out to you over the other? The next question, what is a trope or trend that you're tired of? And only because I just read it for what feels like the 1000th time. I am so tired of when in dialogue, men say good girl. I know some people like it. It's just a preference thing. It's just everywhere. It has flooded through so many books. And it's kind of lost its value, I guess you could say, if that's even the right way to put it. But I'm not, okay, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just gonna say it. Hopefully you'll know what I mean. I'm not asking for the most creative ways of expressing yourself or being intimate. And that would be weird in its own way. Or at the very least, I'm not asking for you to create like an entire magic system just so that somebody can say something kind of sexy that's different from what other people say. It's more that it's starting to feel a little lazy. I guess to sound like, I don't know, some old-fashioned lady or something. But I'm like, what happened to beautiful confessions of love? Or what happened to little subtle things where that highlights the ways that characters feel about each other? Because there are, I should let you all know in case some of you are not familiar with this. And for those of you that are familiar with this in books, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. There are two instances where good girl gets used in books. One is during an intimate act. And weirdly, I mind this less because I guess this kind of fits into what I was saying. I don't need the most creative. If they're going to talk, you know, I think being really different in what they're saying during the moment could be a little, it could pull you out of the story, you could say. But there's also the characters are just talking, and clearly there's some character that's going to be the love interest or that already is the love interest, but in just casual conversation, they say good girl, and then the lady will flush, or she'll redden, or suddenly her mind starts going to improper places or whatever. and that's the one that I'm just like, just no. I mean, it's not just that one. I don't know if I need either to be so prominent. We gotta have a balance, you know? There's gotta be a give and take. We can't have too much of it. But that one in particular, it's not like it ruins the book for me. It's not like an instant DNF or something like that. I guess I'm like, this is only at this point going to work if somebody has never read a book that has this. But if you've read it, you're like, oh, here we go again. And I guess what I mean when I say what I actually would like, it's not just these grand, I love you so much confessions. I'm not looking for just that. But I guess what happens, and the reason I say it's a little lazy, is because it removes any of the individuality from the character. Sorry, I sort of mumbled when I said that. Individuality, it sort of removes it from the equation. When characters are getting to know each other and care for each other, and maybe even when there are moments that do bring about those improper thoughts, I guess I want them to be more specific to the characters. I want their dialogue to feel like it actually makes sense for this character and this character, whoever they are in a story. And we've talked about before this sort of copy-paste feeling that some of us have noted across some of the couples that you see in stories, regardless of whether it's just fantasy romance or romantasy or not. It can happen the good girl thing can happen all over. It can be in just fantasy, it can be in contemporary, it can be in fiction, it can be in anything. So this criticism of I want the dialogue to feel a little bit more specific to the characters so it doesn't just feel like a copy paste of the same people in any story. This can go for any genre. When I wrote my notes good girl, I anticipated just saying it and then moving on, but I guess I had a lot more to add. Moving on to the next question. A popular series you have no interest in reading. Okay, it's not that I have no interest. I feel like every question I'm like, hold on, there's an asterisk, I have to clarify. If I truly have no interest in reading something, I probably won't read it because I recognize that I already am going in with hesitation. I'm going in almost looking to validate the feeling of why I didn't want to pick it up in the first place. If I really, really, really don't want to pick something up, I'm probably not going to. I'm also not a fan of hate reading just to make content or hate reading just to be upset about something. I'm not really a fan of that either for myself. I know some people, they make really funny content that's very entertaining, and that's a different thing. For myself, I just don't want, I would rather spend my time reading things I actually like. I do find though that there are some books where I'm interested in them, but tying this all back to what I said at the beginning, where I try really hard not to know what other people are thinking. That is these two books that I'm going to mention, these two series, are examples of ones that it was inescapable. I have seen people talk about it. I know the general feelings about it. And that would be Dungeon Crawler Carl, and Sun Eater. Also, in saying I don't want to know too much ahead of time, I'm not trying to say that how dare any of you have ever commented and told me what you thought about something. First off, I often ask, what are your thoughts about things? And then second, that's not quite what I'm talking about. I mean, people go really in depth, borderline spoilers for certain works, and that's the stuff that I really don't want to see. Not just spoilers, but the really over the top feelings that then if something gets big enough, it starts to be known to everyone that this is how people feel about this series. I think that's happened with both of these, and I just have to kind of go into it and see what I'm going to think of it. I also will say that they're so hyped, and I really don't like going into books with too high of expectations, and it's nobody else's fault. If people love the series, that's great, but I really want to try not to go in with hype. However, it's not that it makes my interest go down, it's just I find myself, I keep pushing it off, you know, like people have said like, I think you would like it, you should check it out, or I've read it and I want to know your thoughts. Friends of mine who have read one or both of these and have said, oh, I really like this, here's why. And it makes me like, I want to have some time. I want to have some time away. I did this with Addie LaRue. This happened as well with Addie LaRue when it came out. And I was talking about before that I like a lot of V. Schwab's works. But when Addie LaRue came out, I saw so many different conversations happening, so many different viewpoints. And I pushed it off for a long time because I thought I need to try to remove some of this from the equation so that I can go in and have as close to possible the least influenced experience with it as I can. And I don't think that's going to happen with either of these. So I just have to get to it. But the interest, rather than having FOMO and really wanting to get to them even more, the opposite happens for me. And it's not that I think, oh, I don't want to read it because it's popular. That is how it kind of sounds as I'm saying it. That's what it sounds like I'm saying. That's not what I mean. I just mean I don't want to have too much of what other people are saying influence the reading experience. Now to the last question. The saying goes that the book is always better than the movie, the adaptation, whatever form it takes. But what's an example of something where you feel like the adaptation actually was or is better than the source material? For this one, I'm going to say Frieren Beyond Journey's End. I've read some of the manga. I've read the manga for what is currently coming out with season 2. All of season 2 is not out just yet at the time of filming. But when I came back to season 2 of Frieren, I immediately wanted to cry. I didn't necessarily have that feeling for the first season, but there was something about coming back to it and then just being reminded of the loss and this melancholy nature to the story, the bittersweet aspects to the story. I just find that how the music is utilized, the colors, the voice acting, I am watching the sub if anybody's curious, the voice acting, and just the way they linger on certain moments or certain shots, or the way that maybe it was just a single panel and they really emphasize it in the adaptation. I just feel that they are bringing it to life in the way that you want an adaptation to do. If you're interested in more things to do with Frieren, by the way, I have talked about it a little bit more extensively over on my side channel, Full Meta Analysis, so I'll have my Frieren videos linked. But anyway, that's it for the Unpopular Opinions book tag. I'll have the questions in the description bar, and I'll have my most recent Unpopular Opinions 2.0 tag also in case you'd like to watch more ranting or venting, I guess you could say. But thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.